Heavy Trip is a 2018 released Finnish comedy directed by Jukka Vidgren and Jouso Latio.
Good pronunciation there. It's the story of four friends who are in a band who they've never played live for anyone. All they've done is practiced in one of their basements, but they've been practicing for many years. I think it's a very small town. There's no real fans of their style of music except themselves. So there's Turo, who works in a psychiatric hospital. There's I'm going to try very hard with these pronunciations, but forgive me if they're wrong. So there's Lotvonen, who works in his parents' slaughterhouse. They slaughter reindeer, obviously it's being Finland. So there's Yinki, we never find out whether he does have a day job or not. And then there's Pasi, who works in the library. And when people ask him for Justin Bieber CDs, he gives them black metal CDs instead. So, as you do, try and broaden their taste a bit. You know, they can play their instruments pretty well. We see them practicing at the start. Turo can certainly blast out a growly, shouty vocals that is synonymous with that kind of metal, and the others can all play their instruments. But yeah, they just never really found the opportunity to play live. And then one day a Norwegian guy turns up at the slaughterhouse looking for some reindeer blood to buy, as you do. Through the course of conversation, they discover that he's a promoter for a music festival in Norway. So they give him their demo, well, and hope for the best. He says he'll take it away and listen to it after they've covered him in blood. In the meantime, it sort of gets out that they've met this guy and, there might be a gig in Norway they can play. And then the whole town hears about it, and suddenly that's it. You know, they are playing this gig, even though it's not been confirmed by anyone that they are actually going. Turo sort of plays along with it, really. And then suddenly everyone in the town, you know, they get a lot of abuse, particularly Turo gets, you know, abuse thrown at him by the local youth, shall we say. And but suddenly everyone's got respect for them because, you know, they're actually going to make it out of the town and play their music somewhere else. There's a local girl who owns a flower shop who takes a bit of a shine to Turo, much to the annoyance of another local musician by the name of Joni, who's a singer in a sort of, what do they play? Sort of, I don't know, just easy listening, I guess, isn't it? And he's got his eye on her as well. So yeah, it's, you know, the trip of the title is their journey to Norway. It does take the film a little bit of time to actually get to that point. It's their sort of quest to actually play this festival.
Growly, shouty. You can tell here who's a fan of this kind of music, can't you?
How would you describe it then?
Guttural. Maybe.
Well, yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah, growly, shouty, I love it. Yes, so Heavy Trip. So this is our fourth and final bands, theme of month of bands that we've been doing. I had heard of this one before, but again, much like the other ones we've done, this is kind of up my street, I suppose. And I have to say I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very... it had its flaws, but I really went with it. And much like Deathgasm last week, and even Airheads the week before that, I think much like those films, it had a kind of heart. It felt like or I felt like it understood its subject matter. It got what it was like to be a metalhead.
Again, like Deathgasm, they were, you know, they were the heroes, which, as we said in the video for Deathgasm, that's quite rare for the sort of the metalhead to be the hero. Usually the butt of the joke.
Yeah, exactly. There is. I mean, they're kind of stereotyped. The stereotypical metalhead in the film, but you know, there is a scene where there's like the local kids into, I suppose, like hip hop or dance music, and they're in their, you know, their souped up car and wearing baseball hats, and they like to, you know, call him names and stuff, which is how, you know, if you're a metalhead growing up, then kind of that's what you were subjected to a lot of the time. And there is a great joke in here. Of course, that turns into something else later, which is very funny. Yeah, it understands its subject matter, and you're right. It's putting these people up on a pedestal. They are the heroes of the film. They're the stars of the film. They're not the ones to be jeered at or joked at in the background. I think it's really nice if you are a fan of this music. It's quite interesting, actually. I mean, this one was 2018. Deathgasm was 2016. 15, 16. Lords of Chaos, whatever you want to say about that film, that did come out a few years ago as well. And, you know, there's been quite a lot of these films over the last few... It's almost like suddenly this kind of music has become... It's kind of hit the mainstream, which it kind of did. I mean, this kind of music did hit the mainstream in a way, I suppose, at the early 2000s with bands like Dimmu Borgir from Norway, Cradle of Filth from Britain. You know, these are bands that kind of they started getting signed by major labels, I think Sony and record labels like that. So they did kind of dip their toes in the kind of mainstream waters. But even so, that was 20 years ago now. So it's still taken 20 years for cinema to kind of catch up in a way. You know, there have been films like Hesher, and there was an Icelandic film. What was that one called? I can't remember what that was called. There was an Icelandic black metal film, and there was one called, was it Pop something, which was sounds a bit similar to this one, which is where there's a black metal band, are going to split up and they go and play, I think they play Hellfest, which is an actual festival. So it's interesting. There were lots of suddenly kind of, it was a few years ago where lots of these kind of films started popping up, which, you know, like I said, if you're a fan of, when I was into this music 20 years ago, there was nothing for me. I mean, we had Airheads and maybe a couple of others, or films that featured the music on the soundtrack, but not films about these people. And so it's quite nice to see, you know, because these fans still exist. There are fans of heavy metal, death metal, black metal, extreme metal. They're still out there. Obviously, the bands still exist, and there are always new bands. I thought it was very funny. It was a bit slow at times.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it takes a long time for them out. You know,
It does.
considering the title has trip in it, the actual trip. Yeah, it doesn't really happen until sort of the last third. But, you know, I was still entertained. You know, I was not thinking, are they actually going to go anywhere? When's this trip going to happen? But I was still entertained by what was going on. And to be honest, once the trip did begin, it's kind of this, it gets a little bit farcical. So it kind of lost me a little bit. I was enjoying the comedy, you know, the tone and the comedy, but it goes a little bit over the top. I felt there's this whole thing with like the Norwegian border guards, and it just gets a little bit ridiculous. Well, there's still some funny jokes in there. It went a little bit over the top, and it kind of lost me a bit.
It was a little bit like Deathgasm last week. I mean, the stuff that we seemed to both enjoy in Deathgasm almost was the stuff I enjoyed in here, which was them in the town. I mean, in a way, it may have been funny had they not even gone on the trip, and that was like it was almost like you were aiming to go on the trip, and they never made it out of their town. Because when they do get out of their town, you're right. It was, to me, it felt like they were trying to cram every joke they could into this one 90-minute movie.
I did wonder whether, because obviously, you know, these Norwegian border guards are portrayed as a bit idiotic for the most part, bumbling fools. I did wonder whether there is some sort of rivalry between Finland and Norway. And it's like they're poking fun at the Norwegians. I don't know, you know, it's quite possible because I'm sure a lot of bordering countries do, you know, have these sort of rivalries. They either poke fun at each other or invade each other. So I think we'd rather they poke a bit of fun.
It didn't remind me at the time, but you saying that kind of reminded me when I went over to Inferno Fest, which was a Norwegian black metal fest. I went about 10 years ago. And when myself and my friend got to the airport in Norway, when we landed, we were pulled out of the queue by the border, you know, by the customs people, and they went through my bag. I had to get everything out of my bag, and they were like, "Why are you here?" And we were like, "Oh, we've come to see a music festival." And they were like, "Oh, the black metal one. My son is going to that. Rock on, have a good time, lads." And then he just let us go, and it was like, okay. I just thought, what a random moment. So yeah, maybe the Norwegian border patrol are a bit. I don't know. I mean, I also wondered, because I at times found it quite... I laughed at a lot of the jokes. Obviously, it's comedy, and comedy is a tricky one to do at the best of times. And of course, here, it's being translated over from Finland. So obviously, they're going to have kind of maybe their own type of humour. And maybe that, for me, is why it maybe felt slow at times, because I kind of had to catch up with... Do you know what I mean? You kind of had to catch up. Although you're reading the subtitles, you're still having to catch up with certain things. But, you know... They got it, again, like Deathgasm did, and I thought it was, you know, there was some nice nods to actual heavy metal bands. There's like no... I don't think there's any actual metal on the soundtrack. I mean, there's metal on the soundtrack, but I think it's all been written for the film. I don't think there's any actual, like, bands on the sound. You know, Airheads has got, like, you know, actual bands on there. They reference actual bands in the film. There's a very funny... So obviously they're like a covers band, and... they decide they're not going to go on tour. They're not going to play a gig until they start writing their own music. And there's a very funny scene where the guitar player starts playing riffs, and he tries, and the other guy's like, yeah, no, that's actually Walk by Pantera, and then there's another, and he does that like 3 or 4 times, which I thought was very funny. So there's lots of lots of great joke one-liners for people into that scene. But at the same time, I think it would work if you weren't into that scene. I mean, you're not, and you liked it, so...
No, I enjoyed it. Because, I mean, again, I think much like Deathgasm, they're just nice guys. It doesn't matter what they're into. They're just likeable characters. There's a lot of funny stuff from Passy with, the guy who tells him that he's copying riffs from other bands, and, he works in the library, so he gives out black metal when people ask for Justin Bieber, and... He's very sort of dead. He's a bit of a strange one. He's quite deadpan. And then halfway through the film, he suddenly turns up in corpse paint and then stays that way for the rest of the film.
That's also very funny, that scene where he's... Although it kind of reminded me of Clark's when he's in the library and he's handing out... Because it reminded me of the bit when Randall's in the... when he's he's in the video store and he's giving out the porno titles to the mother and the child. It kind of reminded me of that scene a little bit.
There's some good physical comedy in there as well. For example, when Frank, the concert promoter, gets covered in reindeer blood, and then when Yinky is running after his van and calling him, and he suddenly brakes, and he's got like a pickup truck thing with an open back, and he just ran straight into it and flips over into the back. So it definitely it got I was laughing throughout, even like I say, even when it was a bit over the top, there was still some funny gags.
I think there was also, like I mentioned, I have no idea if that bit is a homage to Clark's or not, but there were other moments in here that I could definitely see being homages to other films. I mean, there's a scene near the beginning where Turo is when he's working and he kind of slides in across the floor, much like Tom Cruise in Risky Business. He also rides a bike, which is... I know there's a couple of other films that have kind of paid homage to Gummo, which Gummo is the famous American film that had a lot of black metal on its soundtrack, and in that they kind of ride their dirty old bikes down the street, and there was a scene in this that kind of reminded me of that. So there were definitely nods here, I think, to other films. I mean, it's very deadpan, this film, very it's dry humour, which I really enjoy anyway. So I think that's probably why I kind of went with it.
But I mean, the other thing, obviously, it's set in Finland, filmed in Finland, got loads of beautiful scenery to enjoy in the background. It looks like a nice little town that they live in. And then when they get up into the mountains, there's lots of nice scenery there as well. Yeah, no,
I really enjoy it. We shouldn't leave without saying what kind of music they do play.
Oh yes,
which is a funny, very funny scene. Which
he's asked several times what their style of music is.
Yeah, and Passy likes to say. So I got it here. It's where you place symphonic, post-apocalyptic, reindeer grinding, Christ abusing, extreme war, pagan, Fennoscandian metal.
There you go.
So which
asked to see that section in HMV. And the band is called, because at the start of the film they don't even have a band name, but so they have to think of one, and they settle on Impaled Rectum with a K, obviously, because it's metal.
Yeah, I mean, there was a scene in Deathgasm when they were coming up with names, and there's a scene in this film as well, where they were coming... I mean, the two films are quite similar, apart from, obviously, Deathgasm becomes a horror film. I mean, also this film did actually remind me at times of Airheads. I mean... There's similarities in it. In this, there's a band trying to get their song played on the radio. Here's a band that want to try and get onto a festival. There's an Australian film called Thunderstruck, which is about a band, and there's a similar plot thread in that film that exists in this film. So you have this, don't you? Picked it up on DVD.
I did. I picked it up on DVD. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't find a UK release. It doesn't, whether it's ever been shown here, whether it's been on TV, I don't know, but. This is the US DVD. In fact, it's just been, I think in April there was like a limited edition released through, I can't remember which distributor, but then there's a standard edition. I think the only limited thing about it was the slipcase, but now the last few days there's been a sort of standard edition release, which I think is basically exactly the same as it's got all the same features on it, but it's obviously just Blu-ray, so it'll be high def instead. I managed to pick that up on eBay. I mean, there are obviously European releases, but it's a bit hit and miss as to whether they'll have English subtitles. If you don't speak Finnish, then you might be better off trying to get hold of the US copy. And it's got a few features on it. It says bonus scenes and blooper reels, so it's kind of a combination of kind of little deleted bits and also, bloopers. And then you got the Flooding Secretions, which is Impaled Rectum's song. Got a video for that. Actually, I don't think it's a video. I think it is literally just a picture of them on the screen with the song. And you got some real bands reacting to the band, to Impaled Rectum. I don't know if there was any bands that I'd actually heard of that spoke on the video, but there might be some that you'd heard of. I can't remember the names of any of them. None of them were familiar to me. And then there's a featurette called Heavy Trip Goes to Texas, which is basically where the actors who played Turo and Yoni go to Texas. And there's sort of, I mean, I guess it must have been some sort of promotional thing when they were.
Well, that isn't, because that's what is at the South by Southwest festival. Was that? Cause
possibly,
that's Texas, I think.
So yeah, they must have been promoting the film there or something, and they just go to. They're just sort of 2 or 3 minute little clips of them talking to native Texans about the band, basically, which is quite amusing. And then there's just a karaoke version of Yoni's song, which is quite amusing. So not a huge amount of features and nothing particularly long, but a few little added little tidbits there that just to enjoy.
I think for me, my only flaw was the music itself, because if you've grown up listening, I mean, I don't listen to death or black metal anymore, and this what I'm about to say is obviously only relevant to people who do like this music, I suppose. So if you're not a fan of it, it wouldn't really matter. But for me, what they were doing wasn't really anything groundbreaking. I mean, it sounded like the trouble with this kind of music is a lot of it can sound, I don't mean to cause offence to people who do like this music still, but a lot of it can sound quite similar if you don't know it. But even if you know it, you can pick out all the bands that sound quite similar, and occasionally you get a band that really stands out from the crowd. But the music in this felt quite safe within the genre. But then that's maybe because I've grown up listening to that music. So obviously for me, it has and fans of this music, it's going to be different to maybe somebody who's not such a fan of the music. I don't know. That was kind of my only flaw with it. It was just the music was a bit bland. I don't think they had an actual. I think one of the writers of the music was in a band, but nothing I'd ever heard of. So had they maybe got an actual death or black metal band in to write all the music and do something special, but then it doesn't matter because obviously it's fine. That was kind of for me the only flaw of it, I think.
I mean the music was inspired by a reindeer carcass getting stuck in a grinding machine. Do any of the bands that you listen to take their inspiration from that?
You'll be surprised where many of the bands I have listened to in the past have got their inspiration from. So that was Heavy Trip, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button there, and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on social media, and join us again next week for another video.